Hello, I'm Deborah Sword.
Hi everyone, my name is Tyson Bankert.
Tyson, I've been thinking about shame as a driver of conflict. And I'm thinking of it as a driver because when you feel shame, it can make you fear conflict, make you avoid it, and resist dealing with it rather than learning the lesson that conflict carries with it. And I talked about that phenomenon in a podcast episode back in October 23rd of 2024. So if the listeners want to go back and listen to that one when they finish with this one. But let's talk about what is shame. And I see it as a feeling of belittlement,
Mm,
of having taken or been made to feel that you've taken a wrong action. And shame negatively affects our belief in our own competence to deal with conflict. And it's demoralizing. You feel ashamed. It affects your identity, your sense of yourself.
mm. It, I definitely have felt this shame spiral when I'm in conflict with someone, and but it kind of lends me to both think about and reflect on that feeling of some might say shame is actually helpful because it allows us to maybe manage that conflict or to apologize. And I'm not sure. I feel like oftentimes shame isn't a motive. Like it is a motivator, but from a maybe a not so great place. Because there's a difference between shame and then maybe feeling guilt for causing something.
Mm.
And so yeah, I'm curious, Deborah, like a little bit more of your thoughts on that. Like how do we are we still conflict competent if we are feeling shame?
Yeah, I hear what you say about when you're feeling shame, it's more looking inward.
Mm,
To guilt, it's a self-reflection. I call it a self-imposed punishment. And it's about judgment that we feel we're being judged, and at the same time, we're judging ourselves. And often we're berating ourselves for something we did or said that we feel humiliated us. And I want to just mention the difference between feeling shamed and feeling shame.
mm,
When you're feeling shamed, that's someone imposing that humiliation on you. That's the jerk who finds out you failed a test and runs around the playground yelling, "Nah, nah, nah, Deborah failed the test. She sure is stupid." That's being shamed. Feeling shame is when I make someone feel bad, which I didn't intend to do. And then I leave the conversation, go, "How could I have said
mm,
that? I'm so disappointed with myself. I don't know how I could have been so insensitive, and I don't know what to do to make it better."
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think about the scene the in Game of Thrones when uh, a an offender as everyone in the streets is saying shame, 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 throwing tomatoes and they're really you know there's an excitement there. There's judgment amongst the villagers, right? And that person didn't do anything wrong, but from an outside looking in, it's what did they do? They're being punished for this. And I think it's really hard to then try to resolve conflict when you're in a situation in which you're being almost told to feel something for something that maybe you didn't do. And so that the competency or the ability to be competent is a little bit faulty because it's coming from a place of I'm actually not taking responsibility, which is what we often talk about, versus that feeling of shame from what I've really heard you say, are feeling it is helpful to then start to address why and with that other person to maybe repair some of that harm potentially.
Yeah. And you've mentioned in the past about the need for an apology. So if you feel shame,
Mm,
that you actually feel like you do need to make amends, There are some ways to do it. And where shame affects conflict is it stops us from thinking about the other person's experience, from seeing it from their point of view, because we're so locked in our own headspace. We don't have a lot of room for empathy. So, the conflict competent response to feeling shame, multi-pronged. First is to check your expectations. Like, do you really expect everyone to like you all the time?
Mm,
You're feeling shame because you're excluded. Um, if it isn't deliberate and harassment and bullying, I'm talking about just your friends went to the movie and didn't invite you
right.
for whatever reason. Um, it is may not be that they don't like you. It may just be they found themselves in the same space, but you feel shame.
Hmm.
But thinking that you can be perfect all the time, it's not an expectation you can live up to. Forgive yourself for not being perfect. Forgive yourself and cut yourself some slack because you made mistakes, that you said something you wish you hadn't. You would like to take it back. Sometimes you made a decision that later you said it was unwise. And sometimes we just fail at what we're trying to do. So, as you said, you learn the lesson, do it better next time. So, the conflict competency, the big one is to say, okay, I feel shame. That tells me the following things, and what have I learned from it?
I think a couple of things I will add to this is the idea that for me, sometimes shame leaves us isolated
Mm.
and not really being able to, shame hates being spoken out loud oftentimes. And so when we confront our shame, I think we're able to actually and really acknowledge this is how I'm feeling and understand it as shame. You're able to then be able to actually address the conflict, right? Saying the thing out loud really allows for shame to not be over you, rather than you are in control of it, and therefore then you can be able to respond to the matter at hand.
That's a great point. And if you want to think about how long people have felt shame, it goes back to biblical times.
Mm.
Um, in literature, the Scarlet Letter, Nathaniel Hawthorne, it Hester lived with shame. That was her punishment, was to be shamed by wearing the Scarlet Letter, public shaming, and she had to deal with it. So there's a lot to be said about shame, and it does impact conflict because it sets you up in a tension where you want to deal with the conflict and you're feeling shame that is a blockage to doing it well. So I hope those tips for how to deal with the shame so that you can deal with the conflict were helpful.
Well, thanks so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And we will be back next week with another conversation.
Thank you.